Hugo Münsterberg, in his 1916 essay The Photoplay, A Psychological Study, was the first person to suggest that film, rather than just being a poor facsimile of theatre, was an art form in its own right. Whilst this is an idea taken for granted today, at the time he wrote it, it was revolutionary. And his assertion that film's individuality stems from the fact that it obeys not physical laws of time and space, but instead purely psychological ones, is a concept that few filmmakers even today are conscious of. So come with me now as we explore the art of the mind. Münsterberg described how the photoplay elucidates the human condition by overcoming the principles of our outer world, that is, space, time and causality, and by adjusting events to conform to the principles of our inner world, the mind. He defined film's principles of the mind as movement, attention, memory, imagination and emotion. As Walter Benjamin described in his exorbitantly titled essay, The Work of Art in the Age of Mechanical Reproduction, until the invention of the camera, our eye was the centre of our visible world, of our outer world. The eye can only be in one place at a time. It must take time to move through the world and must consume the world at the same pace as the world progresses. And so the visual arts too, painting, sculpture, theatre, was subject to these limitations. Not only did you have to be privileged enough to physically be where these works resided, but the actors on stage were bound by the stage. They could only tell stories in linear time and singular places, or else make rough facsimiles of transitions therein. After the invention of the camera, however, this was no longer so.
I am an eye, a mechanical eye. I, the machine, show you a world the way only I can see it. I free myself for today and forever from human immobility. I'm in constant movement. I approach and pull away from objects. I creep under them. I move alongside a running horse's mouth. I fall and rise with the falling and rising bodies. This is I, the machine, maneuvering in the chaotic movements, recording one movement after another in the most complex combinations. Freed from the boundaries of time and space, I coordinate any and all points of the universe wherever I want them to be. My way leads towards the creation of a fresh perception of the world. Thus I explain, in a new way, the world unknown to you.
In the most simple mechanical terms, a film is a series of flat, static images displayed before us one after the other, as opposed to a solid, consistent object. And yet movies appear to us as undoubtedly, well, moving. Why is this? A common misconception, still held by many to this day, is that the perception of movement is the result of persistence of vision. The phenomenon of positive after images, thought to remain on the retina for about 1/25th of a second after the exposure to light, are believed to disguise the gaps between two differing frames of film, resulting in an apparent fluid movement. Whilst persistence of vision is an actually occurring phenomenon, and does explain why we aren't consciously aware of the black gaps between frames, it cannot fully explain our perception of constant movement in film. In 1912, Gestalt psychologist Max Wertheimer conducted an experiment that used lines on a screen, shown in quick succession, to create the illusion of movement. Persistence of vision could not account for this. It had to be some complex mental process, which was later termed the phi phenomenon, that created this appearance of motion. This imperceptible but crucial mechanism demonstrates that even on the most fundamental level, the film is a creation of the mind. But that is just the beginning. Film, as all art, must have meaning. But what is meaning? Münsterberg used the example of being spoken to in a language you do not understand, compared to being spoken to in your native tongue. Objectively, both are simply a series of sounds, but an alien language would provoke no inner response to you. It would be meaningless. You would, however, be able to understand the message of someone talking to you in your own language, as your mind creates associations based on your knowledge and memories, and reacts by creating new ideas and emotions. The meaning of words exists not in their sounds, but in our own minds. The same is true of the meaning of any object, person, or event that we encounter. So how does the mind create meaning? Of all the psychological processes that the mind uses to interpret the chaos of the world around us, says Münsterberg, the most central is attention. Our attention is what transmutes all we encounter, both in life and in art, into that which we truly experience, by selecting what is deemed significant. Everything in our life is shaded, as Münsterberg describes it, by our attention or inattention. In what ways can art secure our attention? Well, the actor on a stage who speaks or moves expressively or approaches closer to the audience can hold our attention, or direct it to another actor or object on the stage. The painting makes use of classical rules of composition and colour theory to compel our eyes. But what about film? Film can utilise the techniques of both theatre and painting in order to draw us in. It can portray actors' movements and speech and bring them closer to the viewer. And as in painting, scenes can be composed within a frame and colour can be used to hold our attention. But films alone can go even further. They can grasp the attention of the viewer by actively replicating it. Things that hold our attention become clearer in our minds, more vivid to us, and things that do not hold our attention fade away and become duller. When you're sitting in the library engrossed in a book, the contents of that book may become your entire world. The hustle and bustle of the conversation around you, the building itself may cease to exist. You experience only the book. And what happens in life is what happens with any art of the eye. An expressive face or the grip of a finger on a trigger may seem, if they capture your attention, to become for a moment your whole experience. But this is not under the control of the artist. The mind chooses its own point of attention, and any act too subtle that we have not been made aware of in some distracting way is likely to be missed. In this sense, the visual arts of the outer world, like real life, are limited. The film can replicate the working of our mind so that an object of attention can, with a close-up, actually become our entire experience. Any act, no matter how subtle, can be made the object of our attention. If the ornament at the child's throat is at once shown in a close-up, where everything else has disappeared and only its quaint form appears much enlarged on the screen, we fix it in our imagination and know that we must give it our fullest attention, as it will play a decisive part in the next reel. This example, given by Münsterberg, was already a cliché by 1916, but it demonstrates a form of narrative technique unique to cinema. The technique of wordlessly drawing our attention by acting as our attention through the use of close-up. But our attention merely dictates which object the mind gives meaning to. Further psychological processes must still come into play in order to create meaning. As when our mind interprets speech, whenever our mind gives meaning to something, it relies on our memory of what has come before and our imagination to generate new ideas. The simplest demonstration of this is that to understand any event within a narrative, our mind has to recall all that has come before it. In our day-to-day lives, this recollection can happen in the mind only. In film, however, we can cut or flash back to any previous point and give specific context to an event or revelation. The filmmaker alone can, without words, engage the mental act of remembering. As with the close-up, a flashback brings a mechanism of the mind to the toolbox of the artist. But a flashback is only one way that film can be used to capture our mind's perception of time. Film can do what only our imagination can do in real life, and cut forward in time to give us a version of the future in the midst of the present. It allows for events that take place before our central narrative to be presented to us, revealing a background to the current events that can change our perception of them in unexpected ways. And film can go further still. Not only can it present to us what we as the viewer might remember or imagine, but it can show us what is happening in the minds of the characters, allowing for narrative possibilities outside any other medium. And here, the manipulability of memory and imagination can be used to artistic effect. Some of the most renowned feats of cinematic narrative are built around unreliable recollection and flights of fantasy presented before us with a vividness only before possible in our imagination. Not only can film, as the mind does, cut through time according to the psychological laws of association, but space too. Several events happening in tandem but in disparate locations can be present in our attention on the screen as is only otherwise possible in our minds. There is another mental process that can be presented in film, that of suggestion. As we can cut through time and space to form associations as the mind does, it can get away in the midst of action, engaging our imagination to speculate for artistic purposes. Not only can film capture the imagination of the characters and audience, it also has the power to capture the emotions. The close-up can heighten the subtle expressions in the artist's performance better even than we might see in real life. But in film, emotional expression is not limited to that which the actors show. Film can use mise-en-scène, the arrangement and styling of settings, people and objects, to affect the emotion of both the characters and us, the audience. Whilst this is something that can be made limited use of in stage and other visual arts, it can be taken much further in film. Take, for example, the moment at which our hero reaches his lowest emotional ebb and the stormy clouds burst as if in sympathy. And film has a means of garnering emotion, Münsterberg states, that is incomparable to any other form of art. The movement and repositioning of the camera. He was the first to consider this possibility. In fact, when he wrote about this, he said, "This possibility of camera work still belongs entirely to the future." This has to be Hugo Münsterberg's greatest revelation, the concept of cinematography. The idea that attitudes and emotions might be aroused in us through camera work. It's come to define some of the greatest works in the art of film, and he was the first person to consider it. The cinematic techniques Hugo Münsterberg described back in 1916 might seem obvious to us now, even overused or cheap clichés, but it is in understanding his core idea, how film is an art of the mind, that the full artistic potential of film can be realised. So can Münsterberg's theories be applied to the film versus digital debate today? Well, according to Münsterberg's theory, film exists not on celluloid, nor even on the screen, but only in the mind, which actualizes it by conferring movement, attention, memory, imagination, and emotion on a series of dead shadows. And likewise, the film exists not on the hard drive or on the continuously scanning LEDs. No matter the source of the stored information, the film exists in the mind, for it is the art of the mind. Word.